How you doing?
Morning, Gianmarco. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Thank you so much for doing the show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Late congratulations on your first stand-up special, Shelf Life, which came out in December, correct?
Well, it came out on YouTube on there. It actually came out at the end of 2020.
Oh, really? Okay. I saw the date on YouTube and I didn't even realize. Well, it's a fantastic special. I mean, I've watched it a few times now in
Oh, I
preparation for this
appreciate it.
interview, and it's fantastic. You're a great joke writer. I can't wait to, talk about the experience of filming it and like your approach. But before I get on to that, I have a bunch of things I want to touch on. First of all, Gianmarco Soresi is one of the most Italian names I've ever heard. Are are
Yeah.
are you a very Italian person? Like, do you back that up? Is that like
No,
very present
I
in your
mean,
life?
I was raised. My mom's Jewish, and I'm much more Jewish than I am Italian. But my mom did not lean into the Jewishness at all. Her parents told her she could either have a bat mitzvah or a sweet 16, and she chose the latter, and that was kind of the end of my Jewish heritage. And my father, despite being only a little Italian, played it up intensely. Oh, we had a secret Soresi is my last name. We had a Soresi sauce that I think was just like ragu with butter and sugar in it. And he really raised me to think that I was, I never did like the math genetically as a child, but he raised me to think I was like 100% Italian. Um, and then as I got older, I realized I wasn't very Italian. And then recently, over the pandemic, I had a Sicilian cousin reach out to me over Instagram, and now we're reconnecting to some of my Italian roots. So it's real.
Yeah.
It's real. But I have never taken the DNA test because I am very frightened that I would be like 4% Italian. And then I would have to get rid of so many jokes.
Like the Italian Elizabeth Warren.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
It's funny. I asked my most Italian Jewish friend, a great saxophonist by the name of Jeff Nania, if he could give me any insight into your name, because he's always talking about families and this part of Italy and that part of Italy. And he
Sure,
said,
that's what Italians do.
"Oh, yep, yeah, I knew he was the perfect person to go to." And he actually said, "Ask him if he has family in Sicily." So I guess he
Yeah,
nailed
that's where it is. That's
it.
where it is. It goes. There was a Soresi pasta back in the day, but I think during the Great Depression somehow it shut it down. So it's there. It's all there somewhere.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't gotten to dive into Italians on my show. I try to be diverse, inclusive, but I don't know if I could talk about Italians a lot. We're gonna focus on the Italian more for a sec because I
That's
want to
fine.
talk
That's
about
fine.
I want to talk about stereotypes. So we're just gonna leave the Jewish part to the side for now.
Sure.
Uh,
Sure.
so I mean, like you said, you weren't fully like steeped in that yourself, but do you see any Italian stereotypes like coming to life in your relatives and your experiences growing up?
I mean, my dad, we're definitely like a very physically affectionate family. There's a lot of hugging and kissing. I mean, only encounter to the Jewish. I probably, it always sounds weird to say it out loud, but my dad and I probably have kissed, I don't know, 100 times more than my mom and I have kissed. Um,
Well, you talk
and
about it in the special. That's part of what got me thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's just very. My dad's just very physically affectionate. My mom is kind of the opposite. I mean, she would turn off the lights just to breastfeed. It's a very different. So we definitely have that. I think there's a. My dad, he talks about family being very important, but he's very distant from his entire family. But he always would say, "La familia è tutto." Family is everything. But he would only say it for me to come home for the holidays. It never had to do with like him being close to any of his family. So manipulative. I guess that's another Italian
Oh,
trait.
oh yeah.
There's like guilting. I don't know. Catholics, Jews, Italians, they all talk about guilt. And I'm like, I don't know. Is this really exceptional to our culture? Is this just people? Um, so Italians
Yeah.
definitely have. There's a lot of like Italian Jewish crossover. We have certain like facial things. When you have a big nose, there's Italians with big noses too. So there's a lot of crossover there. There's a
Okay.
lot of mixing
Okay.
and mashing, and sometimes when I think about the ways that I'm Jewish, I'm like, well, I think I really got them from my father, so it's Italian. But I just think there's a kinship there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Very strong Italian stereotypes. Did your father or any family members feel personally attacked when Cuomo was going through his whole Italian debacle?
My dad, I don't think he really had a lot of thoughts about Cuomo, but he fucking hated. Sorry, I didn't mean to curse.
You good? Okay.
He hated Giuliani. My dad hated Giuliani. He talked about Giuliani like went after the mob. Like being Italian, my dad once he got in a fight with my dad is not great with waiters, which is it's nothing to be proud of. He got the waiters said something was not spicy. My dad said it was spicy. I took a bite. I said it's not spicy, and my dad said to me, "Don't ever go against the family." And like that's what being Italian in America today is. Like there's these echoes of a mafia, but for things that don't matter anymore. So he'll quote these people who in the mafia, but for very mundane things. He'll be like, "Oh, I made him an offer he couldn't refuse on Groupon." Like it's a very watered down version where you're not sure how much of this is really from Italian culture and how much is it from you just watched The Godfather at a young age.
Yeah.
Like my mom got mad at me because I went through this phase. I saw The Godfather probably in like third grade, something insane, and I started signing my spelling tests, Gianmarco Vincent Soresi Corleone, and my mom was like very upset. She was like, the Corleones were criminals. That's not your name. But for some reason, I thought I could get away with it, and my dad was like, "Yeah, whatever. Call yourself Corleone."
You're,
Um,
well, like you said, it's very mundane. I have a lot of Scandinavian blood. It's like me saying that my dad doesn't like to go to the doctor is a Viking thing, you know?
yes, yes. Um, so in that way, and my middle name is Vincent, but my dad told me one day, "Oh no, it's actually Vincenzo." And once again, my mom said, "No, it's not Vincenzo. Not at all. Not in any way, shape, or form." And the other, I saw my dad this weekend. I was doing a college gig that he drove me to, and he wrote down my name on something, and he wrote Vincenzo, and I'm like, okay, I think you're crazy. Um, but I do like it. I do like my name. I had a manager once who wanted me to change my name to something Jewish, and I said no.
Yeah,
Um,
that feels a little riskier. I feel like if people try to call you out for lying, if you get caught calling yourself Vincenzo, I think you can play that off.
sure, sure. I mean, people change their name when they join the union. I do think it speaks to a degree of progress in society that a lot of Jews changed their name to enter show business. And my manager was like, "We need to Jew it up." Winona Ryder. I just read an article, a New York Times article by Jason Zinneman, and Winona Ryder. Her real name was Winona Laura Horowitz.
Oh,
Horowitz, and whenever she was coming up, they told her, "You need to get rid of that immediately." So it's good.
it
It's
seems
good.
like she's
We're
doing all right.
re-entering.
Yeah, I don't.
She's doing great now, yeah. But I'm saying now we're at a place where they're like, you need to make it more Jewish. So that's good. I think that's progress, I guess, in some messed up way.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say so. I mean, but just beyond the Jewish stuff and the Italian stuff. I mean, what is like your cultural background besides that? Because I saw one commercial for Ravella, a drink called Ravella that I had never heard
Ravella,
of.
yeah, yeah,
Were
yeah.
you speaking German in the commercial, or was that
Well,
Italian?
I appreciate. I was not speaking German. A German in a sound booth somewhere was speaking German,
It
and
did
I was
look a little
moving my
funny. That
mouth.
makes a lot more sense.
It was a very that gig. Uh, I guess it filmed in South Africa because the tax rate is good there, and it was for a German soda. And I guess they could not find the actors in Germany, in London, in South Africa, in Brussels, and so they went to America and they cast two Jews. Me and the other guy were Jewish, and they just flew us to Africa. They told us it was in German. I am abysmal at languages. I'm abysmal at accents, and they had a vocal coach there to see if maybe we could pull it off. And, like, German had, like, sounds that I've never made with my mouth ever.
Yeah.
And immediately you're on set, and this is a gigantic film shoot. They've flown 20 people to Cape Town, South Africa, and I can't do it. So they're like, all right, we'll just dub it later. And it truly felt like an incredible waste of money, but I was very happy to get that money. And they just had me mouth the words on set and had someone record it after the fact.
Yeah, it looked great. It looked like very high production values. They had you like, I can't remember all the things you were doing, but it looked like there was like they had to use like green screens or something or some
Green
special
screen.
effects or
It was very much like this was when the Old Spice ads where like just a bunch of
yeah.
random stuff happens. It was very much a rip off of that. But it was like they dragged me through a field. They had me on a mechanical bull. They had someone hit me with sticks. It was very dangerous. It was definitely one of the more dangerous shoots I've ever done. And at least in America, like SAG, the Actors Union, has a lot of strict rules. But in this case, I was not in America, and it was a little scary. It was a little scary.
Yeah, it looked like a German York peppermint patty commercial. All the
Yes,
places they're trying to
yes.
take you. But I mean, yeah, I was expecting you to speak like four languages or something. Just the fact I was like, is that German?
Sure.
But is that as weird as it gets? I mean, what other kinds of commercials have you just had fall into your lap?
I mean, that was definitely the strangest commercial I've ever done. I was kind of the sort of spokesman for General Electric for a little bit. And for that gig, they had me Snapchat was just kind of popping off. So they would have me do things in character on Snapchat. And one of them, I had to climb a wind turbine. They flew me out to one of their wind turbine fields in California. And I got there. This was a gig. It paid very well. I've yet to get back to this place. And when I got there, it's just like a skinny little ladder in the middle of a gigantic turbine, and you're just supposed to climb up. And for a second, I was like, I don't know if I am going to do this. It was so scary. And it's a very weird feeling because, the agents worked out a thing. There's a contract. You're going to get paid. They flew you out. They put you in a hotel. And then you get there and you're like, oh, I'm too scared. And they started freaking out, and they're like, I guess you can walk around the turbine. I'm on the phone with my agent, will I still get paid if I don't climb this ladder? And ultimately I did it, and it was one of the scariest things I've ever done because I've been skydiving, and the difference between skydiving and climbing a 10-story ladder is like skydiving is one decision. You jump. Once you jump, you're on the ride.
Yeah.
When you're climbing a ladder, every step is a decision to continue. And it's just a series of, am I going to go a little higher? Am I going to go a little higher? And that was the scariest gig I've ever had.
Oh my god, yeah, I can't imagine. I've never climbed anything quite as high as that. But I mean, the commercial work seems cool. I want to talk a little bit about the voice acting work at some point because I'm really into all that. But I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about shelf life also. Um,
Please.
but I mean, before I get into the more specifics, just as a general question, do you like talking about like the theory of your stand-up comedy and all the nuts and bolts? Because you seem like a classic like joke writer. Like you're very punchline
Yeah,
oriented and
I love talking theory. I have a fear that to the layman, it's like it's very quickly boring and it
yeah,
kills the magic of it. But I love theory, of course.
yeah.
I'm a nerd.
Well, yeah, I'm a musician primarily, and I've been doing stand up on the side for about a year, and I love music theory, but I also know that when I interview musicians, it's like you can only go so deep into you know D Dorian scale or something that the audience has no idea about. Um, Music, another thing I would like to touch on with you, but there's a few jokes in the special I had like little follow up questions about. Like you say in the
Sure,
special
please.
that an Uber driver told you that stand up comedy is best when you're drunk.
Yeah.
Now you did a your special in a very close, like small environment. Looked like I couldn't tell how many people were there. Maybe a couple
Yeah,
dozen. It looked
it was
like.
about yeah, it was about 20 outdoors. This was the summer of 2020, so like everything was socially distanced and temperature checks um, and that was the max that was allowed or that we could fit with keeping people six like as far apart. People came in pods. Like it was tough, man. It was tough. Normally, if you're going to film a special, you want a packed room,
Yeah.
but this was the only way we could do it, and yeah, that's
It
what it was about.
it felt full, like audio wise. You like worked the crowd great, but it's definitely like a very noticeable thing. Like my favorite Dave Chappelle special is the one where it's like the small intimate crowd. I don't know if you know
Yeah,
what I'm
in the
talking about.
comedy store. Yeah,
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 and I like those smaller intimate shows, and I thought it played very well for your special. But like obviously it wasn't ideal because of the pandemic. But like the Uber driver was saying about like, oh, it's best when you're drunk. Like, what are the things you think are best if you can control them for your stand-up sets? Like, what do you want the room to be like?
I mean, it's very hard, and like you want people to be a little drunk, but they can't be too drunk. I taped this. I taped something for Comedy Central, and they it's free. They get people in advance. There's an open bar, and when you have an open bar, they could get too drunk, and then they get too talky. So like ideally, you have people a little bit tipsy. Ideally, I think a lot about is like whoever goes up in front of you. If I'm going to film something, I want someone going up in front of me who maybe does a hair of crowd work, but is getting people in the mode for setups and punchlines. And when there's setups, they listen, and when there's punchlines, they let it go. You want someone to get people in that rhythm.
Yeah.
Kind of, you got to train an audience. And I know some phenomenal hosts where, or maybe they're amazing at crowd work, but I also think like the host, the opener, whatever, needs to, aside from the crowd work and getting everyone energized, they also need to train them in what they're about to witness. Because you don't want to be, if they just do crowd work and they just talk and riff, and then you come out there and you're telling jokes, sometimes you can feel corny. If you don't set people up to like, here's what we're doing here, we're telling jokes, it can be like, oh, okay, this guy's not going to talk to us, he's just going to tell his jokes. And it's like, well, yes, that's the art. That's the
Yeah.
art form. So like there's that element. You want people a little bit tipsy, a little bit energized, in the mood for jokes. Ideally, you have an audience that knows you and likes this art form, so they understand that already. Um, but I do think you want a bouncer there. You want a big dude. So if someone gets a little too chatty, they can just stand a little close to them, and hopefully it stops.
Yeah.
But it's tough, man. I mean, even some of the best comedy clubs in the world, if someone is really wasted, until they cross the line of they need to be thrown out, they can just be a persistent nuisance, and it's tricky. It's
Yeah.
very tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that it's just like watching that they start out as distracting, and then it gets to a point where it's like, where can I turn on them without becoming the villain myself?
Sure, it can be very because you're not cool. Like part of being a stand-up comedian is you're the clown, you're jokey, you're having fun, and the moment you go like, hey, can you please, can you please not talk right now? It's really like now you're the principal,
Yeah.
and no one wants to see the principal tell jokes.
Yeah, even having an audience member say it kind of like takes a little bit of the energy out of the room, I feel like. Like if someone else says
Yeah,
something to another table or whatever, I feel like when I'm watching stand up, if I hear someone talking, if I want to say something, even then it's like I do want to just focus on the jokes, and it's I don't know. Do you have any particular bad stories of like audience members who were particularly difficult? Maybe something you haven't if you've already told a lot of stories, maybe something that's a little more obscure,
yeah.
but
I mean, I've had a lot of like bachelorette parties are notoriously kind of the nightmare. I always say there's nothing scarier at a comedy show than a white woman in a plastic tiara. That is, and I recently did a casino. I forget where it was. God, in Milwaukee somewhere, and it was one of these things where like the bachelor party. I saw them entering the venue, and I was like, "Oh no!" They were loud before they got into the casino, and they wanted me to acknowledge. One of them wrote me. The mother-in-law wrote me, say, "Hey, can you give us a shout out?" And I was like, "Yeah, I could do that." But then they just kept going and going, and they kept trying to talk to me the whole show, and they're having a fun time. Everyone else is bored, and I did a thing where one of the codes for comedians to let the club know you need some help is they could use a glass of water, and that's supposed to mean that's the way where you can stay looking cool, I guess, and the casino will take care of it. But I
yeah.
guess this casino had a different code. They had a different like code word that no one had told me about. So I just kept saying like, they could use some more water over here for these people. Big glass of water, and I kept saying this, and nothing happened. And at the end, I went up to the bouncer, and he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry about that bachelorette party. I was going to say something, but it looked like you were handling it pretty well." And I was like, "No, that's what. What would have to happen? Would I have to start crying? Would I have to get into a ball on the stage, and you go, "Oh, he doesn't look like he's handling it very well at all. I better go do something."
Yeah.
That's my job to make it look like I'm handling it well. Your job is to go, "Oh, I should help."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's now I know to see what the club's code word is because it's not always they need some water.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to like audience members who are maybe a little more innocent but still distracting, like in your special, there were definitely some nothing crazy, but like obnoxious laughers, like people where it's like, oh, this person is like one of the bigger mouths in the audience. In the local comedy scene where I go to open mics, there's one guy who's notorious for ruining people's recordings because he's laughing so loud or he's got such a particular laugh. Do you ever like have you ever dealt with audience members who are into it but they're so distractingly loud
Yeah,
and like
I did a winery a couple weeks ago, and there was this woman, and like sometimes a joke would really tickle her fancy, and she would laugh with everyone else, and then she'd keep laughing, and everyone would laugh at the fact that she kept laughing. It was a funny moment, and then she kept laughing after that, and it was like, oh no. And then she left the room, and it's like, okay, again, everyone laughs. Oh, this is funny. And then she came back, and she did that about 5 more times throughout the night. And it's one of those things where like she's having fun, but I can see from my vantage point, the rest of the audience is like, okay, enough. But I can't. What am I going to do? I can't just move on because her laugh is so loud, and it's awkward to be like, "Can you stop laughing?"
Yeah, it's even worse than the principal thing. It's like then you're like the joke police. I mean, for
Yeah,
like
yeah,
enjoying it. Um,
and that can be really tough. I think like a mean heckler, you can shut them down, but sometimes people just talk and they're not being mean, but they're being distracting. And if they're in the front row, especially, I can hear them, but everyone behind them cannot. And so, like, I can, again, it's from my vantage point, I can see that they're ruining the show for other people, but I don't know what to do
yeah.
because they keep talking. And sometimes with hecklers, it can be very tough. You just got to ignore and keep going forward, and you just hope they take the hint.
Yeah. Um, well, as far as your crowd goes, specifically for the special, I did notice that you had two older audience members who you were throwing some good jokes at, but some jokes that people might call a little ageist. Have you
Sure,
ever
sure.
no, no, but like have you ever have people tried to come at you for that? Like are there things that you think are like so benign that you still get in trouble for?
I think making fun of people for being old is okay. I've never had anyone complain, partially because they know that I'll be there someday. I think, especially with ageism, like I have a joke now about having a doctor that I felt like is too young. Like the thing about ageism, and when you're talking about like employment and like losing your job and your livelihood, it feels very visceral. But I do think one of the nice things about making fun of ages is that we're all going to be, we either have been that age or we will be that age. So I know that someday when I'm in my 80s, should I be so lucky, people will make fun of me for being old, or someone will make a wisecrack about it. So I'm going to enjoy it now while I can, because someday I will be the butt of those jokes, and I will have to take it on the chin because I enjoyed them now.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I thought they seemed to enjoy it in the special. I thought it fit perfectly in, but I sometimes wonder like where, uh, obviously there's always gonna be people who are always like super sensationalists, will make a big deal about anything. But like, have you gotten close to like actually getting in trouble for jokes like that?
yeah, I've gotten heat online. It very rarely happens in person, and I think that's so important to remember. Uh, just about kind of which world you concern yourself with. I've had a couple jokes online that people have been upset at me about. Um, I had a joke. This was like during the beginning of the pandemic. I had a roommate. My roommate had moved like right before the pandemic from China to America, and right as like COVID was hitting America, that's like when they moved to America. And I think I had a joke about something like um, that's like boarding the Titanic from the iceberg.
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was at a time where there were a bunch of morons committing crimes against Asian people, uh, with an insane, with like in their minds justifying it with an insane connection to COVID coming from Asia, from China, and it was like, so people were like, this is blaming China, or this is somehow anti-Asian, and I really felt purely in my heart like I don't think that is the case. This is about geography.
It's a silly
Um,
joke. Like
and it's a silly
I feel like
joke.
you could make. Yeah, I feel like you could. I feel like
Yeah,
it's a clear like one to one, but like obviously people will take that and run with it.
yeah, and like again, it happens online, and when it happens, yeah, of course it flares up my anxiety. But I think I sit with myself. I go, do I think this joke is harmful? Do I think it's mean-spirited? And in that case, I didn't think it was. But rarely in person. The only time I've ever had like an audience member approach me after a show, I have a joke about the DC sniper. I grew up in DC, and I performed it at a show, and it's a dark joke, but it's I'm proud of it. And I performed it in Connecticut, and a woman came up to me kind of teary-eyed and said, "Just so you know, the reason I think that joke didn't do well was you're right next to Newtown, Connecticut, where Sandy Hook happened."
Oh, right.
And again, it's like I'm like, okay, I I still don't think it was the wrong joke to tell. Yeah, are people not really a little more sensitive about a joke about guns? Sure, but again, it's fine.
You just
I
gotta
was
go
fine.
for it.
They were fine.
Yeah.
Um, but I've seen people with guns. Uh, I saw I was at a comedy club I work here in New York called LOL Comedy Club, and this guy told a joke on stage about wishing there was more people getting shot in Queens so his rent would go down. Pretty innocuous. And when he came up to the bar, I was there in the bar. This woman came out, and she had lost her daughter in the Las Vegas shootings.
Ooh.
And she said, you're very funny, but just think about the gun jokes. And she had a postcard with pictures of her daughter. Like, clearly she carried these around with her. Pictures of her daughter at different ages, graduation, being born. And the comedian was very uncomfortable, of course, and she went back in the showroom. Now, the comedian she was about to watch on stage, very good comedian, who was doing a joke. I knew he was working on a joke at the time about, a bit crass, but something about women should let you use the booty hole because you would take a bullet for them. And I knew he does a long act out about, like, him getting shot multiple times. Like he acts out the bullet hitting his shoulder and his waist and his knee. And I just sat in the bar, and I knew this would happen. And she went back in the room, and about 5 minutes later, she comes storming out, screaming for the manager. And, and her husband comes out and is like, "Baby, let's just go. Let's just leave." And she's like, "No, I want to speak to the manager. This is so offensive and horrible." And, the manager comes out. He has nothing to say. He just goes, "I'm sorry. You don't have to pay for the drinks." And they left. But again, one of those things where it's like, yeah, it makes sense. I understand being like, I don't want to see an act out of someone getting shot.
You came to the show, though.
You came to the show, and, like, just you can just leave too.
Yeah.
Like, you can just leave. You can just go, "Oh, I took a slight risk, and I don't like this," and just go.
Yeah. I don't know why you're handing out postcards to comedians, though. Like, shouldn't you be giving those to politicians or something? Like, I get
agree.
not liking something, but it's like, when you're upset about an actual issue, I feel like the comedians aren't the people to go to. I feel like they're better at helping mend the issue and just like in a escapist kind of way. Like I'm gonna be so ridiculous that this is clearly not like grounded in reality. Not that it's not like in like a little bit of a way, but it's just funny. I'm such a lover of stand up that and I have a dark sense of humor, so I am not really easily offended. But I get people being upset with things like the whole Dave Chappelle controversy and all that. Like I get being upset, but I'm very strongly for just letting comedians try the joke.
Yeah, I think like I would argue like there is some stuff where I'm like, well, are these jokes, or are you expressing something that feels like hateful on a I will defend anyone trying out a joke to see if like it works. Like we talked before, I'm a joke guy. I admire the structure, but like I do think we live in a bit of a strange time. And this is like a mix of like, well, what are podcasts where people have ginormous followings, and they express an opinion where I'm like, I don't know if this is a joke. This just feels like what I would consider a somewhat harmful take. And you're just like, I don't know. I think it's too easy to just be like, whatever.
Yeah.
Nothing matters. As long as you're saying it's comedy, then it's free. I would argue sometimes with these controversies, I'm like, well, yeah, this is not comedy. So discuss it in a different forum. Just because you're billing it as comedy doesn't mean that you're really telling jokes. And I do think there's something to be said of like when you have a gigantic audience, you do have to think a little differently. And that's tough.
Yeah.
But the other option is don't be successful. So with success, to quote Shakespeare, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah. That's Shakespeare originally?
Yeah.
I didn't know. I thought it was like Spider-Man or something. I was just saying that the other day.
Yeah.
But as a joke, I mean, it's so played out to say that. But you know, while we're talking about the dark jokes, I know you said something in your special along the lines of, "You have no idea how many dead grandma jokes I cut from the special." So you have to have some more dead grandma jokes in the bank, right?
Oh yeah.
I
I've been
mean, do you
working on a
want to
couple
try
now.
any out on me right now?
The one chunk I'm working on. Well, I talk about how I used to think I was going to be a professional singer, but I've only been booked 3 times to sing in my entire life, and it was
I know where this is
my
going.
grandpa's funeral, my other grandpa's funeral, and my grandma's funeral, which was really sad because it means I only have one concert left. I've been calling it my farewell tour, and it feels good. I remember once my last grandma said that my singing's a nice reminder there's things worse than death. So that's a little chunk I'm working on.
Very nice. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your grandparents. I only have one left myself. But thank you for humoring me in my dead grandma joke search. All right, what else did I want to get to here? When you're writing, do you consider yourself more of like a write on stage kind of person or write on paper?
I write on my laptop,
Okay.
and yeah.
Now, do you ever? I assume you record your sets, and sometimes you'll riff something, and you'll want to work with that. Do you ever have trouble recreating a moment that you've got a new tagline or something that you think works really well, but do you ever have trouble kind of recreating that vibe from those improvised jokes, as opposed to taking stuff off the paper and putting it on stage?
Yeah, I think you learn like what worked in the moment, what was very specific to that show, and you only have to try it once to be like, yeah, that was a lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
And then other times you are able to recreate it. It's just like, whenever, if you riff, it's like, if you look at it like in terms of a joke, you have a setup and a punchline, and sometimes the setup is like, whatever was going on in that audience that day. And if that's the setup, if the setup was there was a British couple to my left that was very stern, it's like, well, maybe you can't recreate that because you can't recreate that setup in a different space.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I never really thought of that as part of the setup. That's interesting.
yeah, there's I have a joke that starts. I remember the first time I ever did it was I performed stand up in so I'm at a comedy club saying this. I performed stand up at a high security prison once, a little nicer than this place. And like in the room I was in, that was a riff, and I was in a terrifying garbage comedy club. And I remember once I tried that line, at a comedy club that was a little nicer, and it didn't work. It didn't work
Yeah.
because it was just like and now I know it only works in like the dingiest of clubs. So that's what I mean.
Okay. Yeah, and I feel like um I like a lot of like observational like roasting type stuff, and I feel like a lot of that is very throwaway, dependent on the specific night, how someone looks that night, like what they're doing. So like when I roast my friends or something, like I feel like it's very specific to that time. But as far as just writing goes, sometimes I feel like I have trouble recreating a certain moment. So I don't know. It's interesting to hear about just like how you approach that and how you get the material out. Do you find yourself like listening back to specific old recordings a lot? Like when you're really happy with a set, will you go back and like just keep listening to that old stuff, or are you pretty dead set on like what you're working on right at the moment?
I listen back all the time. I listen back to every set. I gotta kind of cut back because at a certain point I'm like, Jesus, like I cannot listen to myself anymore.
Well, I figure you
Um,
listen to the current stuff, but do you have like old favorites? Like, oh, I really liked that show. I'm gonna go way back and listen to even that, or do you not really, do you kind of just leave that all like stored away?
there's so many recordings on my phone. Like even finding an old set would be borderline impossible. So yeah, I kind of leave it.
Yeah.
I leave it because I mean, there's just so much, man. There's so many. There's so many. The only thing I'll go back to is if like if I like a crazy bomb or a crazy weird thing happened, I'll save a couple of those. But
Yeah.
no, you got to let it go. There's so many shows to worry about.
Yeah. No, I'm
I
sure.
Yeah.
Um, I was listening to your podcast, and
Thank you. I noticed
I,
we had a listener this week, and I was like, finally.
well, I wanted to take a sec to ask you how your girlfriend's night terrors are going.
My girlfriend's night terrors are much better. Um, and it's one of those things like, well, we don't even really know why because it's hard to know. Like, it happens in her sleep. So what makes them better? What makes them worse? Um, but we've narrowed certain things down. Alcohol, not good for the night terrors.
Oh, okay.
Uh, if we have an early flight in the morning, anything we have to like wake up for specifically, that can trigger them. The nightstand needs to be not messy. I don't know if that's real or
Huh.
my girlfriend just says that so I clean up more.
Interesting.
Uh, I There's things about glasses. She's pretty blind without the glasses, and so there's like she has to know where the glasses are. But that's a big one. Like she had a night terror the other night. She just woke up, like grabbed her glasses and kind of hid them under her pillow, and doesn't remember it at all. And so I'm like, I don't know, maybe you need to sleep with glasses under your pillow. Who knows?
Yeah.
But they've gotten significantly better.
Um. Well, like you said, she you know, the the you said it was a mugging, correct? That kind of triggered it.
But yeah, yeah,
Um.
she was mugged.
Well, I'm.
I mean, well, I should say mugged, an attempted mugging. She, the guy took her phone and she went after him and got the phone back.
Very impressive,
And
by the way. Congrats on
I
your
mean,
very,
it's
very
it's
strong lady.
my strong lady for sure.
But I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, it sucks. But do you feel like having for her having someone who can like whose mind is kind of in joke mode, like does it help her more for you to be like over the top comical about it, or do you kind of pull away from the comedy around that?
I think we both deal with tragedy with a comedic mindset. So like with all that stuff, I think we're both very similar in that way. We're both she's a manager, but in many ways, I consider her to be a comedian. Um, just in the way she views the world and the way she interacts with it. So I think with that kind of stuff, we both enjoy making light
Yeah.
of those darker things.
Yeah, me and my girlfriend, we both have very dark senses of humor, and I feel like that's the kind of thing where it would, as you got past it more, it would, become funnier, and I feel like that would help. But I can also see it's the same way with people getting offended at shows. It's just some people, I guess, don't take it that way. But I'm glad to hear it's getting better. I'm glad to hear you two can make light of it. Um, and I was enjoying listening to the podcast. So the theme of the podcast is negativity. Have I or
Yeah,
how would you
I mean
describe it?
it's just about not pretending where things are better than they are, and being honest about how you actually feel about things, which I think all human beings are filled with a lot of negative thoughts. And that doesn't mean that we're like wallowing in complaining. We're making fun of all the things that bother us.
Yeah,
So like, I sometimes get so tired of people online who like talk in this like overly sincere Pollyannish way about how grateful they are and how wonderful things are going, and then you meet them and you're like, oh, they're a schmuck. They're miserable, and they're not like this at all. I think especially social media has encouraged a kind of outward fake positivity that is not real. And so the podcast is like, talk about the things about your family that sucks, and we'll laugh about it.
yeah,
We will have fun with it. But I think it's you have a more enjoyable life uh, joking about the things that bother you than pretending that nothing does.
yeah. I feel like right off the bat, listening to the podcast, just the way you kind of lean into those things, it's very subtle, but it's almost like an immediately like even if it sounds like you're really going through something, there's almost this like built-in inside joke of like, well, this is what today is like. Like I feel like it is just a normal part of life, and to be able to frankly talk about it is kind of funny. Um,
Yeah,
but I like the vibe of the podcast. I definitely have to listen to more. That was one of the last things I touched on in all my research. I mean, there's just too much. There's too much research to do on you. You do a lot of things. It's very impressive. I don't know how you balance it all. Um,
I don't. I don't.
how did you first get started in the arts? Because I know you've done acting, and musical theater, and voice acting. Like, where did it begin?
I've always just been like I like to be the center of attention. I don't know if it was my parents' divorce or what, but
That could do it.
I just always I did all the school plays and musicals growing up, and um, from I knew I wanted to be an actor from kindergarten, and I just was the theater kid in high school. Went to college for musical theater, um, and I'm sure if I had had more success as an actor, I would never be a stand-up comedian at all.
Yeah. Um, Now, I mean, I do want to get into a little bit of like that transition into stand-up comedy. But just as far as being like a young actor goes, I mean, I started out. I was really into drawing when I was young, and I started playing music in fourth grade, and I was a terrible, terrible trombonist who had no idea what he was doing. And then I became an actual like I started playing bass and taking it seriously in ninth grade, and in 10th grade I started doing musicals. So I've done musical theater, and then later on I went on and I played a lot of pit bands. I still do that a lot with playing bass, but I acted in uh, Monty Python's Holy Grail, The Drowsy Chaperone, and Oklahoma. Those were the
Great
three.
shows,
Yeah.
great shows all.
Um, and I was not very good. I was a B character. I just didn't really know how to practice. Would you say that from the beginning you were like able to kind of like set goals and go for auditions with intention and get the parts you wanted, or were you starting out like doing B rolls and stuff like that?
You're talking what's like professionally.
Well, I mean, even in school, were you getting like lead roles early on? Like how soon
Yeah,
were you
I mean,
really comfortable? Because for me, it took me a long time in art to kind of figure out how to practice properly and how to develop my own style.
I had the trajectory of a lot of theater kids where I was the lead in all the high school shows. I got to college, suddenly I was not the lead in everything, and then I got to New York, and then I was the lead in nothing.
Yeah.
And it gets more and more competitive. And at least in high school and college, you felt like you had some autonomy. Once you entered the professional world of acting, it really is a degrading experience, and you have very little control, and there's too many actors, and um, it's really tough. Some people get lucky. Some people, they pivot to write and whatever. But if you're just an actor, if you're just strictly trying to get auditions, you are prey to the winds of fate, and it's a brutal experience.
Uh,
You'll work, and then you won't work for. I mean, I haven't booked a TV film thing in years, and luckily, a stand-up comedy keeps me busy. Uh, but if I was still just acting, I'd be going crazy. I'd be on unemployment.
do you have any like particular favorite shows you've done, and does that make it more worth it? Like when you get to kind of, if you were getting to kind of choose the work, than like searching between jobs.
No, it's like in the beginning you get these small parts, and you're on set all day, and then you go on set and you work for 10 seconds, and so it doesn't really even feel like anything.
Hmm.
I was the most fun act. I have more fun with my sketch team, and when I wrote a play where I get to like do something.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, like some of these TV film roles, especially when you're working in some TV shows, they're just cranking this stuff out fast. So you're there, you get 2 takes, and you're just like trying to look the right way. So it's a horrible profession. I have a lot of disdain for acting these days.
Okay. I mean, when you feel like you're at a point where you can write more and get behind the camera, like if you had the chance to get behind the camera, would you put yourself in front of the camera? You know what I mean? Like, would you write yourself into stuff and you still want to do a lot of acting like that, or do you are you just more focused on stand up, more focused on writing comedy?
Right now, I'm still very much in love with stand-up comedy, and I do want to act. I do want to be funny on film, but I don't want to, like being a series regular on some propaganda show that is like where the script sucks and you're pumping out 24 episodes a year. Uh, no, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
Until I see that paycheck, and then I go, yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm a cop. I love cops. Um, but no, I love stand up a lot. I love artistically the ability to write new stuff and test it out that night. And I really hope to, even if someday, I do believe someday I will have slightly consistent acting work. Someday, that it never impedes my ability to do stand up, because that's really what I love.
Okay. Now, how did this love affair with stand up start? Did you know for a long time before you even tried it that you love stand up, or did it kind of fall into your lap?
I think kind of, I mean, I definitely liked stand up growing up. I never thought of that as my dream, because, in my mind, I was going to be Daniel Day-Lewis. Um, and then I think it's a lot of it is just like, well, how do I like to write, and how do I process feedback? And I'm someone who needs a lot of affirmation as I'm creating, and I don't say that as like that's admirable. It's just who I am. I need to know, like, does this work? Does this work? Does this work? Does this work?
Yeah.
And when I'm on stage, I get to do that, but instead of asking, does this work? I just get to hear, does it get a laugh? And that's how I like to create.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I feel that too. I love that process and how you have to be putting yourself out there and how immediate the feedback is. So, um, I don't know. It's a cool thing I want to learn more about. But watching your special, like it's so tight. Like I said, such good, like concise writing. Like the kind, like there's definitely storytellers I like, and I know that you've like done things in that realm. But it just as far as like pure joke writing, like you definitely like are already killing on that basis. So I love studying the things you touch on and all that. I definitely would love to have more of a chance to pick your brain about the nuts and bolts and the theory and all that. I do have to wrap it up shortly. Please let me know if I'm keeping you too long. But, I mostly have musicians on the show, and I love to
Sure.
ask musicians what they like in comedy. And I like to ask the comedians I have on, like, what do you really like in music? Like, what's the thing you're most passionate about in music, and are you a musician? Would you consider yourself that also?
No, I definitely wouldn't. Uh, uh, my music taste is pretty bad, except for musical theater, where I loved musical theater, and so I like music where I feel like there's some kind of storytelling going on. Like I, I started when I was young listening to early Eminem. Like I think what I loved about Eminem was like there were stories to each of his songs. Like I mean, it's a very dark song, but he had one called, I think this one was called Kim, where he's
Yeah, I
with
know the
his
song. Yeah.
daughter. The one where he's with his daughter and they're
Killing his
disposing the
wife.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's a, I mean that's a musical theater song. I mean it's about a father like entertaining his daughter while he kills her mother, and like I was just so enraptured by it because it's a full narrative. So I really like songs that have, and even if the lyrics don't reflect it, at least musically it feels like it's building somewhere specific.
Yeah.
Um, so that's where my music taste lie. It's pretty eclectic. It's kind of stuck in the early 2000s. Um, but I just like there to be some kind of story.
Yeah. Well, I think Eminem's a great example to bring up because he's like one of the. I mean, he's one of the best rappers ever, technically. But he does such a good job of creating a very specific character, which like a lot of comedians will do too. But it's his character. I mean, it's partially based in like the truth of his mother giving him, what is it called, Munchausen's syndrome by proxy or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
all the things he went through personally, but then he kind of the way he turns it into specifically like I'm gonna be the most offensive. I didn't get it when I was young. When I was really young and I was hearing Eminem, I thought he was just like a mean materialistic rich douchey guy. And then when I actually went back and listened to him, I was like, oh, this stuff is really deep. This is like a very specific, powerful character he's playing, even though it's silly and messed up.
Yeah.
So I like that you bring up that specific example. I mean, he's great. I do have to ask, what's your favorite or a couple of your favorite musicals?
Uh, Falsettos by William Finn,
Never
using the
heard of it.
lyrics. He's a phenomenal person. My favorite Sondheim musicals are, I mean, Sweeney Todd I've listened to too many times, but it probably is the best. Sunday in the Park with George. Company is incredible. I love the musical Nine. Um, I don't know how deep your musical theater knowledge goes. I can go more basic if you like.
That would probably. I mean, I know some, but you're already way further than me. I play in pit bands. Like I said, I did a couple, but you're way deeper. I mean, I love West Side Story, Little Shop of Horrors.
Little Shop is a great. I did Little Shop in high school, and I have a deep love of that
Were
musical.
were you Seymour?
Uh huh.
Nice, such a good musical.
Such a
Um,
good musical.
but I guess this is a good place to wrap it up because I do need to fit this conveniently into the time slot of the show when it airs. This will be airing early next month from when we're recording this. I'll definitely throw in some date promos and some other stuff that you got going on. But is there anything you want people to look out for? Anywhere you want them to look out for you?
No, I just love for them to listen to the Downside, and I think the biggest thing I have coming up in New York State is Funny Bone Syracuse on April 7th. Is definitely a big show I'm doing there that I want to get folks out to.
Awesome. Well, it was so great talking to you. Thank you so much. I hope to catch a show soon. But it was a real honor.
Thank you so much. Take care.